Let's talk about all things, I suppose, lockdown and vaccine with my next guest, former Labour Schools Minister, Lord Andrew Adonis. Good morning to you.
Good morning,
Good
Julia.
morning. Lots to talk about with you. Let's start with schools, but I think you know there are other topics I'd like to raise. The government, the Prime Minister yesterday said they're going to publish an exit plan for a phased route out of lockdown in the week beginning the 22nd of February. We know that schools will be the first out of the lockdown, and that we've heard from the Prime Minister that March the 8th could see the start of a phased return of pupils to the classroom. Do you think that's good enough for schools to be out at least until March the 8th? Realistically, we'll be looking at that point at secondary school pupils possibly not returning until April at the very earliest. As a former schools minister, do you think that's the right policy?
Well, I've got big reservations about the whole way that the schools issue has been handled. France didn't close its schools, and it took a deliberate decision, whilst it had a very tough lockdown in other areas, that after the experience of the first lockdown, when there was a crisis in the learning of children, real problems that parents had in being able to organise their own lives with the kids at home, and big mental health problems that were coming as a result, both for children and for young adults, they decided to make a decision as in terms of a trade-off that they would do all they could to keep the schools open, and they have done so. And it was my view that we should have done the same, and we did start to do the same. And it's still not quite clear to me why that stopped. I think it probably has something to do with Gavin Williamson just not being able to get his act together properly. But I think we should have kept them open, and I think we should now reopen the schools as soon as we practically can. Now, whether that is now the beginning of March, given that we're already at the end of January, I don't know. And I think we should, on the issue of the vaccine, which I know has flared up in the last day.
No, we're going to talk. I want to stick to one topic first of
Right.
all. Public Health England has said that primary schools are safe to open after half term. That's the last week of February. Only 3% of primary schools have even had an outbreak of cases in the autumn term, and most of those were teachers, and we don't know whether they'd caught them from pupils or not. But if you say it wasn't just France that didn't close the schools this time around, Sweden didn't close their schools for under 16-year-olds throughout the pandemic. You say it's Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary's fault. We gave him a pretty hard time on the radio last week. My understanding is that actually, Gavin Williamson, when he was saying that schools were going to reopen, that he had actually been battling for schools to be reopened the whole way through Christmas, which is why Boris Johnson was saying schools were safe on the Sunday at the beginning of January, that schools were safe and people should go back to school. It is the scientific advisors who said no, they shouldn't, and indeed we know an awful lot of polling showing that parents worried because they'd been hearing from the scientists. This is a difficult thing, is that there is competing scientific advice on this, isn't there?
Well, there has to be a political decision about this ultimately, and of course the scientists have said, and I completely understand this, that they want the toughest lockdown that is practical because of the new variant of the virus and the rapid spread, and judgments have to be made, and that's exactly the same judgment that they've had to make in France and, as you say, in Sweden as well.
Do you think? And you think the government here has made the wrong judgment?
If I had been in charge, I would not have closed the schools.
Do you think Keir Starmer is wrong?
As a general
then?
policy,
Do you think
it may be
Keir
that there's
Starmer
some
is
areas
wrong?
where you've got outbreaks.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry?
do you think Sir Keir Starmer is wrong then? Because
Well, Keir Starmer has actually been arguing all the way through for putting schools at the top of the list in terms of keeping institutions open. Now, to be fair to him, he's not the one taking the decision. So when you actually see all of the advice, taking a judgment day by day on what you would do is quite hard. But my principle of action all the way through this, after the experience of the first lockdown, would have been to keep the schools open, and therefore also to prioritise schools for testing, for track and trace, and now also for the vaccine, because I think the public at large quite understand that if you're expecting public service workers to put themselves in the front line and to have to do what other people aren't doing, which is constant interaction, then just as health workers have been prioritised, I think the same should be true.
I hate to tell you, Lord
too.
Adonis, while you're sitting at home in your lovely home on your laptop, that actually millions of people are out working every single day and mixing with other people. And actually, we know that teachers are at no higher risk of being seriously ill or dying of this virus than other people. This idea that teachers should somehow jump the queue ahead of people who are more clinically vulnerable than them, I genuinely think is immoral.
These are judgment calls. It's not the
Yes, there's an
case
immoral
that most
judgment call.
people are at work and interacting. Most
No, I
people
didn't
are
say
following.
most people. I said millions of
Most
people.
people are at home following the government advice, and they're working from home as well. So, whereas we would be expecting teachers to go into the classroom
Where
every
they are at
day
no more risk than
and
anyone else
mix.
who's going into the workplace. Yes.
Well,
No, that is established. That is established fact. Even Jonathan Van Tam, the darling of everybody, as a government spokesman, has said that.
Well, there are two different things going on here, which is very important to understand. The first is, of course, that they're at no greater risk of contamination than other people who are also interacting with other people. But of course, it stands to reason if teachers are going into school every day, mixing with fellow teachers and being with classes of 20 and 30 pupils, that their interaction with other people is going to be much, much higher than most others. And it's precisely for that reason that other public
More than
service workers have been
supermarket
prioritised.
workers.
Yes, and I think that they should be too. I think that there needs to be a prioritisation, which is based on people performing roles that actually involve substantial.
Okay. Well, all I can say is, if we're going to do it
public.
on risk, other than on age being the key factor there, or people who've got underlying serious health conditions, then there are lots of jobs. Drivers, supermarket workers, other frontline workers come way above that list than teachers. Let's move on though. Let's talk about another of our big areas of interest, Lord Adonis, and that is the EU. Now, the European Union Commission, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has basically said that she wants AstraZeneca to give over to the EU up to 75 million doses of the vaccine made in the UK and give it to the EU because their contract does not actually, doesn't actually guarantee a delivery of enough vaccines that they have ordered. Should the UK give the EU some of the vaccine made in this country, to which we contractually have a right to have first, because the EU was 3 months late signing a contract and didn't sign a good enough contract to get those vaccines delivered?
Well, neither you or I, Julia, know what the contract said because they haven't published them. So at the moment, what's happened is a war of words between the company and the EU. I've noticed that our governments, because Boris Johnson's normally out there on all of these things, he's remained uncharacteristically silent on this issue. Now, that may be very, very sensible because he doesn't want to get into to add to the rhetoric on this, but it looks to me as if this is a straightforward contractual issue.
Yes.
And since I don't know what the contracts are, and nor do you, it's very hard to say.
We do have some detail. No, we do have some detail on the contract. We do have the statements of the chief executive of AstraZeneca about what was agreed. We know that the UK, US, Australia signed contracts with AstraZeneca 3 months before the EU Commission did. We know that we helped put in huge sums of money into the production of AstraZeneca vaccine in Oxford and Newcastle under Lyme in Staffordshire, so that we would have that. We also know that the contract that the UK government has with AstraZeneca gives the UK first refusal on any vaccine made here in the UK. Should we, on that basis, those are facts that we know, should we give some of our vaccine, tens of millions of doses of vaccine, to the EU, even though we have a contractual right to give it to the people here in the UK? Yes or no? It's a simple question, Andrew.
Julia, neither you nor I have read the contract with the EU.
You don't have to read the contract. Those have been formal statements made. We know that.
No, but they're contested.
They could be lying.
Statements. No, they're contested statements. The EU doesn't accept those statements. So until we see
the
contract,
the EU hasn't seen our contract either.
No, but
how could they contest them?
But the company has the company itself has a contract with the EU, and neither you nor I know what that contract says. I hope, because you're raising very, very valid issues. I hope that these contracts will be published because it's not actually in anyone's interests. Well, we have a blame game. What we all want to see, of course, is all people across Europe vaccinated as soon as possible.
Yes,
that's the objective. Which we all share.
Shouldn't that have been the objective of the European Commission as well? I think my listeners will not. Andrew, my listeners will not be unaware, Andrew, how hard it is for you to say, you know what? The EU Commission has messed up. They have cost lives. They delayed and they dithered and they played politics, and people are going to die as a result. And this is, as the German newspaper Bild has said, the best advert for Brexit. Can you disagree with any of that?
Julia, I do not know what the contract between the EU and AstraZeneca says, so I can't say whether or not who's in the right or the wrong on
Andrew.
this. But what we all share is an objective to see everyone
Yeah.
vaccinated, and we need to see that happen as soon as possible.
Should
so I
we?
just hope that it's possible.
Should we?
It's
Regardless,
possible to ramp up the production.
yes, regardless of what anyone's contracts say, should we, as an act of goodwill, give some of the vaccines that we have in the UK before all of our people who are vulnerable have their second dose to people in the EU?
I think that what's in the contract.
It's irrelevant. Leave the contracts aside.
I've given you an answer to the question. I think what's in the contract should be followed. I'm not in any way holding back from saying the government was right to sign these contracts early.
Therefore, was the European Commission wrong not to?
Well, it looks as if they were slow off the mark, doesn't it? But what we don't know is what their contract actually said. So on this particular issue of who should get which vaccines from which factory, I can't say. What I can say is that we were right to sign the contract early.
And the European Commission was wrong.
I give complete credit to the government for that.
And the European Commission was wrong to delay by 3 months.
It looks as if the EU, from what we can see, was behind the curve. That does
so they were wrong.
Appear to be.
I mean, if Britain, if Britain can sign a contract in June, and the European Commission didn't sign a... No, we know when they signed it. That stuff is in the public domain.
No, but we don't know what their contract said, though, Julian. You don't know it any more than I do. So we can't say that. But what we both want to see is
we're not talking about what's written in the letter of the contract, Andrew. We're talking about when they signed it. We know for a fact. It is a matter of established fact. We signed a contract with AstraZeneca in June. We know for a... It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what the contract is.
It isn't irrelevant at all. I'm afraid it's absolutely central.
Their contract is 3 months after ours. Why did it take them 3 months?
But the supply of the vaccines didn't happen for some time after that. There wasn't regulatory approval even in England until December. So the crucial thing is what those contracts actually say about the production of the vaccines.
Let's talk about regulatory approval. The EU is pointing the finger and making claims about AstraZeneca and the vaccine supply for a vaccine which it has not yet even given approval to. Do you not think that is extraordinary?
Well, I understand that they're doing it this week, but that's a matter for their regulatory. That's a matter for their regulatory systems. But on the issue of the order in which vaccines should be distributed, the British government has a contract, the EU has a contract, and what those contracts say should of course, be what happens. But it is very important that we get the production ramped up. And the underlying issue on this is, why is it that the AstraZeneca factories in Belgium and the continent don't appear to be ramping up production to the level that we've had here in Britain? And if I were in charge of AstraZeneca, I'd be asking some very tough questions about that.
Genuinely, Andrew, the fact that you are not willing, even when the EU has messed up in a bureaucratic way to such an extent that it will cost the lives of the EU citizens, the fact that you cannot bring yourself to even give a word of criticism of the EU, I think it speaks for itself.